Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, is this a nobody believes in a season for the Timberwolves? That might be a little dramatic, but ESPN projects the Timberwolves to be one of the teams that misses their forecast. Nobody at ESPN on their panel of experts thinks the Timberwolves are going to win the finals this year. Why is that? We're going to go through those forecasts today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Happy Labor Day weekend in the U.S. Hopefully you had a chance to watch some college football. The Gophers got off to a good start last night. College football over the weekend. And, of course, we are about at basketball season. That means that end of summer forecasts are coming out. We talked a little earlier this week about the case for the Timberwolves to take a major leap this season. And there's now more ESPN forecasts out. And apparently there's also people that think that they won't and that they'll miss their forecast. And nobody at ESPN is picking the Wolves to win the finals. It seems a little weird to me for a team that went to consecutive conference finals and has a consensus top, at this point, top 6 player in the NBA, factually based on NBA voting, and a player that everybody agrees is on the rise. So what's the deal? Why is that? We'll go through those forecasts. I'll give my take on why those are bad takes, and that's what we'll do today. A couple other Wolves news and notes as well. We'll get to that. Some end of the roster bones, Hyland stuff, Tim Connelly stuff, all that later in the show too. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube, and you can download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on either Roku or Amazon Fire TV and watch Locked On Wolves there as well. All right. So this was all spurred on by earlier in the week. I think it was Tuesday's show. I did most of that show on the case for the Timberwolves to take what ESPN called a, quote, major leap. Okay. There was a ESPN forecast, I think late last week, that mentioned that the Timberwolves were one of the teams. The question was, which teams will make a major leap? And Minnesota finished fourth. It was a distant fourth. Spurs and Hawks were first. Sixers were second. Magic were third. 48 points in their, I don't need to go through the whole ranking method, but I think it's 5-3-1. The most likely team to make leap gets 5 points. Your second choice gets 3. Your last choice gets 1. The Timberwolves got 6 points, a distant fourth, 1 point ahead of the Rockets, who are fifth, which we'll get back to the Rockets here in a second, because I think they're maybe the team I'm most annoyed by in this whole thing. And it's probably worth myself and Jackson from Locked On Rockets getting on a call or getting on a pod and discussing which team finishes ahead of the other this year, because I don't quite get the Rockets love. But yet here, when you look at a major leap, and I know the Rockets were the 2 seed, but it was a jam-packed West where a couple of games separated the 2 from the 6, essentially, and not essentially, that's really how it shook out. And then of course the Rockets got knocked out right away in the playoffs. So anyway, the Wolves were fourth there. And so I was like, all right, there are some people that thought the Wolves could make a major leap. I made the case on Tuesday's show. Here's how the Wolves could do exactly that. And I'd been planning later in the week to get to the argument against that, the contrarian argument, why the Wolves would not. I'm not going to get into the details on that today, but ESPN kind of did this for me in the sense that there are people that think the Wolves will underwhelm this year. And so I'm not going to get super in the weeds on some of the reasons. I'll probably do that on Monday's show, Tuesday's show next week. But I want to get to the part that really annoys me. And that is I think Thursday of this week, the East and West conference champions and finals predictions were released by ESPN. Okay. And also the standings predictions. So it's a bit of a, I don't know. We'll just do this. We'll look at who goes to the conference finals. That was one of the questions. And a reminder, this is ESPN's panel of experts, and they don't say how many, but it's a combination of like analysts and ex-executives and stuff like that, right? That's who's doing all this voting. So the question, who will win the conference finals, the Western Conference Finals, not who will win the finals, who will win the Western Conference Finals. The Thunder got 106 points. I get that. The Nuggets were second with 50. Fine. The Rockets were third with 35. The Timberwolves were tied with the Lakers for fourth with 7 points. Okay. The Warriors were fifth with 2 points. So a distant fourth once again. and tied with the Rockets. And then the article goes on to say it's somewhat of a surprise that the Rockets aren't the favorite to stop the Thunder in their bid to become the first NBA champions, which, by the way, I'm not surprised by that. I would put the Nuggets ahead of the Rockets. I would put the Timberwolves ahead of the Rockets. I know the Rockets got Kevin Durant. I'm going to try not to go down that rabbit hole now. I'll make that case later. Or the case against them, really. And then they asked the question, who will win the 26 NBA Finals? Not a one vote for Minnesota. OKC got 101 points. The Nuggets got just 36. The Cavs got 27. The Rockets 21, and the Knicks 11. Okay, no Timberwolves, no Lakers, no Warriors. Just those three teams that are apparently now the consensus top three in the West: OKC, Denver, and Houston. Never mind that the Timberwolves have been to consecutive conference finals. Okay, so I was annoyed by that, right? And then the standings predictions came out where they actually like say, hey, here's the contenders, and they did it's the same deal, right? So the summer forecast panel votes for how many wins I think each team will get, and then I guess whoever wrote the article, it doesn't have like a single person attributed to it, then splits it up into tiers: the contenders, the play-in group, and the bottom five. So for the West, the contenders are OKC, 64 wins, the Rockets, 54, the Nuggets, 53, and then the Timberwolves, fourth with 51, one game ahead of the Clippers and Lakers, both with 50. I actually am okay with this because it shows just how compact it is, right? So if you have the Lakers and Clippers at 5 and 6 with 50 wins and the Rockets at 2 with 54, one would think that the I guess prediction of who comes out of the Western Conference, who wins the conference, and ultimately who wins the finals would reflect that a little bit more, that the Wolves or even one of the LA teams would be mentioned as a possibility as a team that could win the finals or would do better than, what was it, 7 votes or 7 points that the Wolves got for winning the West. But instead, even though they're only 3 games behind Houston in this prediction and 2 games behind Denver, they're fourth and a game ahead of the Clippers and Lakers. Now, could the Wolves finish fourth this year? Absolutely. In fact, if I was predicting the West right now, I think I'd put them third. I'd go OKC. I'd still probably go Denver because we know how good Jokic is, and Denver actually did get a little better this offseason compared to what they did the last couple off seasons. And then I'd go Minnesota third. I'd go Houston fourth. And I'm not making a final win prediction today, but I've said since the FanDuel over-unders came out, a month, 6 weeks ago, I thought the Wolves would be over the 50 and a half that it was when it opened. And 51 here reflects that. So does ESPN. They would take the over, right? So Minnesota being fourth doesn't really bother me. The Rockets being 3 games better does a little. And so like the standings projection isn't terrible. Like that doesn't grind my gears too much. I think the Wolves are a top 4 team. I think they are better than the Clippers and Lakers and more than 1 game better. And they're in the same realm as the Rockets and Nuggets, which just annoys me that much more that there's this case that the Timberwolves, like not a solitary person gave them even a third place vote for a team that could win the finals. That doesn't make sense to me. I would say, I understand the argument for the Knicks is, hey, the East is really, there's this vacuum in the East with no Tyrese Halliburton and with no Jason Tatum, so it's the Cavs or the Knicks. Okay, fine. And simple math would tell you that means that they probably have better odds to win the finals than the Wolves because the Wolves have a tougher path to get to the finals. But if the Wolves are in the finals against the Knicks or the Wolves are in the finals against the Cavs were kind of a tough matchup for Minnesota the last couple of years. But, at that point, obviously, then all bets are out the window. So at the start of the season, I get it. But if you look at top 5 teams in the NBA, I probably put the Wolves in the top 5 teams in the NBA, right? Like I wouldn't argue the Knicks are better than the Wolves. You could argue the Cavs are better than the Wolves, but I'd put Minnesota right in there with OKC, Denver, and Houston, and right up there with Cleveland in the top 5 in the NBA. So for them to not get a single vote to win the finals is crazy to me. The thing that really got me, though, is what I'm going to get to next, and that is what just came out on early Friday, was this summer forecast turnaround, turbulent teams and biggest questions article that came out. Or no, I'm sorry, that was the other one. The one that came out early Friday was the Who Could Exceed or Fall Short of Predictions by Tim Bontemps, who, again, usually does a really good job. I take issue with what he said about the Wolves and the idea that the Wolves, spoiler, they fall short of their short of predictions based on this article. I will explain what he's saying. I will refute it, explain why I think it's wrong. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Gametime. College football is back. We talked about this already on the show that, hey, it started last night. And honestly, there's nothing better than the energy of tailgates and being in the stands with your fellow fans. The only downside is trying to get tickets, endless queues, hidden fees, and prices that jump at checkout. And that is why you should use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Perhaps you use Gametime to get into the Gophers game on Thursday night at the bank. You can pull up Gametime, just a couple of taps. You'll see amazing deals. You're going to find tickets to your favorite college football games in Minnesota. It's the Gophers, as low as $25 in the app. I mean, seriously, it's all in there. You can find, and the Gophers have a couple of really good home games coming up later this season. Just simply put, take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right. Real quick, before we jump back in, a reminder about our listener survey we're doing right now. It's a super important initiative that we've got going on at the moment here at Locked On, and it's an important request. We want to hear from you, the listener. We put together a survey to help our listeners to learn more about our listeners and make your podcast, even your favorite podcast, even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the QR code right there on your screen, or simply go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Again, if you complete the survey, you're entered to win a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes if you're listening to the audio version of the show. And a big thank you for helping us out with this initiative. All right. So this article by Bontemps about teams that could exceed or fall short of predictions. Like, on the one hand, I get it. Dude's trying to make content. He's got to pick 5 teams that could be better and 5 teams that could be worse. So what do you do? Well, the 5 ones to exceed, it's actually kind of crazy. He puts the Thunder in here. Expectations, he has a 64 wins based on their forecast. I don't know. Like, it's certainly possible that they could, when Chet or Hartenstein was on the floor, they were on a 70-win pace, right? I get it. There's a chance, but it feels kind of crazy to put the defending champions, a potential 64-win team, as like a team to exceed. The Clippers, I get that one. I think that the Clippers, there's always a little bit, I shouldn't say always, at least in recent history, has been a little bit more buzz around the Clippers than there probably should be. I think the Chris Paul addition, the Brook Lopez addition are great. But I think turning Norm Powell into Bradley Beal, I don't know that necessarily helps them all that much, honestly. So anyway, I get that one at least, because there is some upside there. The Warriors, certainly, we'll see how the rest of their offseason shakes out. The Heat and the Raptors, okay? So teams that are forecast to win in the 30s that could be better, right? Like, I get it. 5 to fall short. The Pistons, which is just it's not fun. I mean, they're projected to win 47 games. I don't know. I guess I get that. The Mavs projected to win 44 just because they're in the West, but I actually think the Mavs will be decent this year. The Spurs, the Blazers, okay, fine. He just picked 4 Western Conference teams. And the Timberwolves. I guess if you're going to pick a team that's supposed to win 50+ in one of the toughest conferences ever, I kind of get it. And also, I guess you're looking for teams that you look at their rotation and say they lost a piece, and the piece that they're replacing it with is unknown. That's the only argument. And that's what he says. He says, last season, the Wolves went to the second straight West Finals, but won 49 games and finished 6th. This is a Timberwolves team that lost Nickeil Alexander-Walker in free agency, requiring youngsters such as Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark to pick up a much bigger load, while still leaning heavily on Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. If either aging veteran misses any time, the Timberwolves don't have a clear answer to replace them. Nas Reid isn't strong enough defensively to make up Gobert's absence, and last year's pick, Rob Dillingham, remains a huge question mark. Then it says Minnesota behind Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, a flexible roster, and Chris Finch's coaching will still be a difficult out next spring. Oh, thanks, Tim. But until then, given the strength of the West and the questions on the roster improving from last year's win total, could prove difficult. All right, here's the thing. I made the case on Tuesday. I'm not going to rehash everything I said Tuesday, but go listen to it. They were pretty unlucky last year. Their Pythagorean win-loss was 53 wins, and they won 49. And the year prior, they won 56. And yes, the roster technically got worse at the top because you lost Karl-Anthony Towns, who's better than Julius Randle, but you got deeper by acquiring Dante DiVincenzo, right? So last year I thought they would be worse, and they were, but they should have been 7 games worse than they were the year prior in the regular season. And they still got to the conference finals, albeit with some good fortune in the second round without Curry being available for the Warriors for the majority of that series. So now, what's changed from last year to this year? Well, a lot less than what changed from 2 years ago to last season. The only thing that changed is losing Nickeil. And yes, Conley and Gobert are a year older. It's not great. Conley's clearly wearing down. I get it. Yeah, sure. But guess what? Anthony Edwards is a year older. Anthony Edwards has a year more experience under his belt. Jaden McDaniels is a year older and has a year more experience under his belt. These guys are still not in the prime of their career physically, and they're still ascending. And this team got to the conference finals despite being a 6 seed last year. They went on the road and beat the Lakers no matter, Luka Doncic, whatever. Like, the idea that this team would underperform, would be worse than 49 wins, it just feels like a complete reach to me. Like, I got to pick somebody from the West because, not everybody can win 50 or more games. Well, why not pick the Lakers? Like, what's going to happen with the Lakers? You know who else is a year older is LeBron James, right? Like, I just, it's shocking to me that the idea is, they lost to Alexander Walker, so they're going to be worse than they were last year. We don't know, and I've made the case this way before. We don't know what Terrence Shannon and Rob Dillingham and Jalen Clark are going to do in their rotation opportunities. But TJ Shannon is likely going to be a higher impact on offense for Minnesota than I think his impact on offense will be greater than what they lose on defense, going from Nickeil Alexander-Walker to a combination of Shannon and Clark, right? I think Clark's in the same realm as Nickeil defensively anyway, and I don't think he's going to play. Jalen Clark's not going to play nearly as much as Nickeil did. But I think TJ Shannon's a capable defender. And if he is a slightly above average defender and he's the gap on offense, him over Nickeil is greater than that gap you're losing on defense, then it's a net win. The offense improves by this much if the defense, gets worse by this much. And then you add in Jalen Clark minutes, and maybe it doesn't get worse by that much more. And maybe Dante has a better defensive year, and maybe Conley gets healthier, whatever. Like, that's probably more of a stretch, but maybe he's healthier starting the year next year than he was for much of the year last season, right? There's a lot of things that can go right. And I think it's easier to make the case for, hey, they had bad luck last year and route to 49 wins. They probably should have won 53, 54, 55 games. And then we'd be like, oh man, they lost Karl-Anthony Towns and were only a couple games worse in the regular season. And yes, some of that's late game execution, but back to my original point, Ant is a year older, a year wiser, has been working on his game, the whole thing. What happened last year? Well, he went from a good three-point shooter to the best volume three-point shooter in the league. He led the league in makes. He shot almost 40% on just insane volume. That, like, go back 12 months, that wasn't a thing. And we started to see it with Team USA, and so I think people kind of thought, like, this could be a thing. But to act like he's not going to add something else to his game this year and to keep getting better, like, SGA made a leap right around his fifth, sixth season. I mean, this is the time when that sort of thing happens. And I would buy, I think it's much easier to buy that Anthony Edwards improves by X amount and that they can make up 80% of Nickeil's overall impact with TJ Shannon, let alone what you get from Jalen Clark and maybe even Rob Dillingham, because the upside there is massive, albeit low floor, high ceiling. I think that's a much easier thing to buy than this team's going to be worse this year without Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I like Nickeil's great, but let's not act like Nickeil Alexander-Walker is the reason why they won 49 games last season. They have Anthony Edwards on their team. He's a top 6 player. He finished 6th in All-NBA voting each of the last 2 years. So the top player on the second All-NBA team is another way, on All-NBA second team is another way to look at that. They have a top 6 player who is 24? Like, this is it's much easier to assume that they're going to be at least slightly better. And it's why I would take the over on 50.5 wins. And even the forecast has them at 51. So I know it's not like their take shouldn't be that outlandish, but to just be like, oh, they're one of the 5 teams that could disappoint this year. It also doesn't jive with whoever the voters are that said the Wolves could have a, quote, major turnaround or major leap this year. Clearly there's some voters that believe in this team. Like, if Ant takes a leap, the team takes a leap and they win, 58, 60 games. That's on the table. Absolutely on the table. And I know the West is tough. I get it. But I think that the idea that they lost Nickeil and what are they going to do? Guess what? They still go 7 deep with Naz and Dante DiVincenzo And I think everybody likes TJ Shannon. Like, I think that's such a weird take. All right. I want to close by talking about some roster stuff. The end of the roster, a little bit of Bones Hyland news. Tim Connelly staying in Minnesota, not taking his opt out. A few things like that took place over the course of this week. We'll do all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here. Next Thursday, 6 days away. The NFL opener, obviously a big trade that happened on Thursday that will shake up the NFC and very well could shake up the NFC North even more. The NFL season, 6 days away. 6 days away, the opener next Thursday night. FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer right now. New customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel lets you bet however you want. You can obviously bet ahead of time. You can look at win totals right now, division winners, Super Bowl winners, etc. Or you could go player props, same game parlays. You could also jump in live as the action unfolds. Maybe you're excited to get on it next Thursday night. There's one game going on. Get on there and place your bet ahead of time, but you can also live bet throughout the game. Division futures stuff is shifting after the Parsons trade on Thursday. Go check that out. And I understand if you don't want to bet the Packers, but yeah, I mean, the NFC North actually probably is the best division of football at this point. I could make that argument. Anyway, are you ready to play? Get over to FanDuel. FanDuel, you can download the app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. Again, your $5 bet, new customers bet $5. If your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Okay. Let's talk about the Bones Hyland piece of things that's flying around right now. So Jake Fisher, who does a really good job, he's been at a variety of different outlets, and right now is part of the Stein line and has a Substack article or writes on Substack over there. He wrote about some Timberwolves stuff. He says that the Timberwolves his direct quote was actively trying to work through the financial details in a new contract for Bones Hyland. It was reported a couple weeks ago that Hyland was likely going to fill the Wolves' 14th roster spot. And we've talked about extensively on the show that the Wolves are unlikely to fill all 15 roster spots. They want to be safely below the second apron, give themselves flexibility. Of course, it gives them the chance that likely wouldn't take back two players in a trade, but just overall gives them some breathing room, right? I've talked about all offseason. I wanted the Wolves to go after Malcolm Brogdon. They're reportedly still interested. Fisher actually mentions that in his article. More recently, like Wednesday's show, we did all about Malik Beasley, potential interest in Malik Beasley, who should have gotten a big contract this offseason, but due to off the floor, gambling related stuff, everybody was scared off, rightfully so. We still don't know if there's NBA punishment coming for Beasley. He's still out there. And amidst all that, the Wolves are reportedly trying to just bring back Bones Hyland. Now, Hyland, of course, last year signed a two-way deal. Everybody knows the history. He was originally drafted by Tim Connelly in Denver, started for them for a little while, was a bit of a six-man for a little while, ended up going to the Clippers, was out of the rotation, has kind of been that high-volume scorer who, when he gets minutes, he scores, but he's not really a true point guard. He's a scoring guard. He's not a very good defender. Bigger guard, which is nice, athletic, etc. Good volume shooter. And, last year I thought they brought him in. It was kind of a Tim Connelly, hey, I really like you, Bones. Let's, I thought the Wolves added him as a two-way guy. Like if they get injuries down the stretch, he gives you a chance to come in and jack up some shots and score a little bit. And maybe you win a game you're not supposed to if guys are hurt, resting, whatever. It never really happened. He never played rotation minutes. And obviously two-way players aren't eligible to play in the playoffs. Bones Hyland no longer can sign a two-way deal because of those restrictions on his age and how many times he's done that. So it would have to be at least a partially guaranteed deal if he's going to take the 14th roster spot. Remember, last year the Wolves signed PJ Dozier to a partially guaranteed deal. They released him before it became fully guaranteed. They did something similar with Austin Rivers a few years ago, and then they ended up keeping him. And there was somebody else in between there that they did the partially guaranteed thing, let them go midseason. My take on this, and this is just my take on piecing this together, if the Wolves are, quote, actively working through financial details, according to Jake Fisher, and haven't just straight signed him, that implies to me that the Wolves, and also they're interested in Malik Beasley. My take is Minnesota wants to partially guarantee a deal for Bones Hyland so that he gets, few $100,000 up front. if he's on the roster at, I believe they can do multiple different checkpoints. Like if he makes the opening night roster, he gets another couple 100,000. He's on the roster December 1st, he gets another 500,000 or whatever. I'm guessing the Wolves want to work in some of those partial guarantee deadlines for the ability to then sign a Malik Beasley or a Malcolm Brogdon if one of those guys remains unsigned. If, the Wolves and other teams may be waiting on the NBA's investigation with Malik Beasley. Minnesota can offer Beasley a little more than the minimum. I talked about this on Wednesday's show, whereas like the other teams that are interested, obviously Detroit can offer him more than anybody because they have his bird rights. That's where he was previously. So they can offer him like 7 million plus. Minnesota could offer a little more than the minimum. The Cavs with the Max Strus injury, especially, it could be an attractive place for him to get playing time, but they can only offer him the vet minimum. Same with the Knicks, who are also reportedly interested. So if Minnesota is saying like, let's wait and see how the NBA investigation works out before we make this decision, but we need to fill our 14th roster spot. We like Bones Hyland. Could they sign him to a partially guaranteed deal that then they can cut bait without hurting themselves from a cap perspective at some point in November, December, January, bring in a Malik Beasley or maybe a Malcolm Brogdon if he's still on the market. And, also then that would protect themselves against an injury. Like God forbid somebody gets hurt, like a DiVincenzo injury or a Mike Conley injury, and they need another guard. Now, if Mike Conley gets hurt, they're not going to replace him directly with Malik Beasley, but that would be more of a case for Malcolm Brogdon or even Bones Hyland, I guess, although I would prefer to have Malcolm Brogdon in that point, in that case. But something like that happens in training camp, preseason, early in the regular season. You then have the ability to go out and I guess you could fill your 15th roster spot. But if it's only a partial guarantee for Bones Hyland, you could cut him loose before one of these checkpoints, one of these contract guarantee dates, if that's indeed what happens. Pivot and sign a Malcolm Brogdon or sign a Malik Beasley if he's still on the market. Say that if DiVincenzo gets hurt like that, like you could say, all right, we want Malik Beasley as our catch and shoot threat off the bench. We can offer him a little more than the vet minimum. It's November 15th. We can go out and do this and let Bones go. And we're not on the hook for the rest of the salary because he's not to this full guarantee date. That's my take. I think that's what Minnesota is probably trying to do. And obviously Bones Hyland and his agent are trying to get the most guaranteed money they can. And that makes sense. I think they're trying to retain as much flexibility as they can, which is a classic Tim Connelly thing. He's great at doing it. It's something a lot of front offices are not good at doing. And, he also likes his guys, which as long as it's not quite to the level of a Tom Thibodeau, we got to bring in Luol Deng. We got to bring in Taj Gibson. Taj Gibson made sense, but it's not quite to that level because the guys he's bringing in aren't getting rotation roles automatically. Like they didn't just give PJ Dozier a rotation role. They knew he was a good locker room guy. They knew he was good to have in camp. They knew he was good to have on the roster until, hey, we need your roster spot. We can't fully guarantee this deal. We got to let you go. That's a good thing for players and agents to know that Tim Connelly is going to do right by them as well. Make sure, gives them another job in the NBA. Like PJ Dozier, I don't think has signed anywhere else. Like these are not guys who are going to go somewhere else and sign a big contract, right? Like nobody's clamoring for Bones Hyland, but it also doesn't hurt the Wolves if they sign him to a partially guaranteed deal for the 14th spot. So I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it, especially if they're able to retain some of this flexibility and then give themselves another pivot point at some point later in the offseason. The last thing I want to hit is that a couple of front office things. Tim Connelly could have opted out this offseason. We did know that because remember last offseason, he kicked his opt-out a year ahead. Speculation, not even really speculation, obviously, because the ownership situation had to get straightened out. Now that it is, Mark Lurie, Alex Rodriguez are majority owners. Tim Connelly did not take his opt-out. He still has 2 years left on his deal. And so I would imagine after this season, the Wolves would look at extending him. Of course, other teams have been interested. We heard the Wizards rumor. We've heard the Nuggets were interested in bringing him back. And Tim Connelly has said, we love it here. I want to be here, all that stuff. He's not going anywhere for at least a year. And I would imagine the Wolves are going to spare no expense to extend Tim Connelly next offseason, or maybe some point late in this season. And then also related to front office stuff, the Timberwolves signed or brought in the not Carolina Panthers, Florida Panthers, the NHL's Florida Panthers former, I forget what his title was there, but president and CEO, I guess, of the Panthers, now is CEO. Matthew Caldwell is his name. It's a business side move. No impact on the basketball side, but it's another example of Mark Lurie, Alex Rodriguez going above and beyond to do what they think is going to make this a best-in-class organization. They gave a 10-year contract, which is kind of unusual for a business side CEO in a pro, the Big Four pro sports. So a big move to bring him in and, has done a great job. The Panthers have had a lot of success on the ice, which of course helps the success off the ice in terms of the business. But we all know the Wolves want a new arena. The TV stuff's going to have to get figured out at some point. Like they've got Michael Bloomberg in the ownership group. Like, is he going to get involved on the media side? Like, there's a lot of stuff there that still needs to shake out. And moving forward with the new CEO is part of that new regime. Makes a lot of sense. And another example of Mark Lowry, Alex Rodriguez doing what they think they need to do to make the Timberwolves as best in class, right? As good of an organization as they possibly can. So that's the news of the day here today. I'll be back next week, either Monday or Tuesday. Monday's Labor Day. We'll do 3 shows next week. I do want to make the case beyond just, Nikhil's gone. Why the Wolves might disappoint this year. I'm not saying they will, but if it happens, what has gone wrong for Minnesota? I want to make that case early next week. That'll be our next show, of course, unless anything else happens. Stuff keeps popping up. There's been a lot more news this week than I might have expected for late August. So we'll be back with you early next week. Have a great Labor Day weekend. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And also, by the way, we talked about college football earlier. It's another big moment right now for Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview that only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season. A Thursday show to get you ready for your college football weekend. There's so many games Thursday, Friday, Saturday now. Thursday night is perfect. You can catch it every Thursday throughout the season only on Fire TV. Of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.